an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering One Piece, episodes 539, 540, and 541. The Haunting Ties, Nami and the Fishman Pirates, a hero who freed the slaves, an adventurer tiger, and Kizaru appears, a trap to catch tiger. In these episodes, we take a trip down memory lane to remind us exactly how awful life was with Arlong, and then we get the story of what was going on with Jimbei and the other fishmen who had decided to start taking matters into their own hands. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Florian for commissioning this episode. This was such a weird ride, you guys, because part of me was very on board for a lot of it, and I was very interested in, after all of this, talk about the way that fishmen are treated being done in this very vague way with Arlong when we first met him, then seeing the realities of that at Sabaody and how much more brutal even than I was expecting it turned out to be. Even despite having seen all of this, I didn't see it coming that Nami was kind of just going to be you know what? It's fucked up that you released Arlong, and I did go through hell, but also I've seen some shit that makes me understand where he was coming from a little bit more. And it's colored, it hasn't pardoned him, of course, because he definitely took shit too far. And even his own cohorts felt that way at the time. But she is basically the realities of what you guys were going through and why you felt like you needed support. It kind of makes sense to me why you took the steps you did. I was very gratified by that, but when I tell you guys this now, it makes it sound like this conversation happens right away. And this is probably one of the more aggressively frustrating payoffs, because the last episode, the final episode of the last section that I covered, ends with Nami finding out that Jimbei had freed Arlong. He confesses that in front of all of them. And thus, I'm thinking we're going to start this one off with the explanation as to why. And that's not how it goes at all. We have, first of all, Robin. She's walking through the forest, looking around and saying to herself, I'm sure if I keep going that I'm going to find something. And eventually her eyes just light up and she's there. But we don't really get to see what it is. I know that she's looking for one of the poneglyphs, but it's, I have lost track at this point, guys, what the poneglyphs, what their significance is meant to be for her. And I think that part of the reason that I've lost track of it is because I'm just not that interested in it. You know, it's the sort of thing where I have to be reminded, because Robin is just not a character that I think about that often. She has such a cool power, and I feel like she could be such an interesting character if she were just, I don't know if it's the voice actor or if it is just the way she's written, but I think it's weird how Robin has all of the components to a character that I would like without really being a character that I like that much, if that makes sense. So then we jump from Robin to all of the guards who are fleeing the palace at the orders of the king. And his two dudes are very, very, cut up over the fact that they took his orders and they feel as if they have let him down. And I know that he did tell them to leave, and I think that they did the right thing, but I can't help but feel like if I were them, I would also be sort of... There's always this feeling when you're looking back on things, like there had to be something I could have done. And I don't, like, there clearly wasn't. They were outmanned here, you know? But I felt for them once they're on the other side of things, out of the conflict, how maybe it does kind of feel like, why are we out here safe and our actual king is in there with these fucking people? The dude with who looks like a seahorse, he's the one who's mostly, we did our duty, we're going to handle this in time, but first we've got to contact the prince and his brothers. Find him as soon as you can. After that, we're going to regroup and make our way back to the palace. And I kind of wanted to be like, I mean, you're going to need more than just the brothers, right? I guess I don't really know what the brothers are capable of. So for me, just getting these 3 dudes and heading back to the palace, like, with the same forces that you fled with, and plus, like, 3 random dudes, doesn't sound to me like it's going to end up any better than it did the first time. But they may have some really cool abilities that make them extremely formidable. What I'm hoping for, of course, and I think where we're heading, is that it's going to be like, well, we'll find the princes, and in the midst of that search, we will also come across the Straw Hats, and they will come back to the palace with us and help us deal with this whole thing. Although we've got some of them still on site, like, already. So it says, meanwhile, in the high-class district of Fishverly Hills, and I keep forgetting that, my God, there's a bunch of people fleeing because the pirates are coming in and basically taking the place over. And they have a portrait of the queen, and we don't find out exactly what this is until later. But all we can see as the audience at first are just these pieces of wood with some kind of paper nailed to it. And it's being flung on the ground in front of, like, random citizens. And the pirates are saying, step on it. You know, you have to step on it because that is, like, the test to make sure that you have fully crossed over. Oh, right. So this officer of the Fishman Pirates, maybe it's Ikaros? I don't know if they even say it out loud on the show yet. Ikaros Much is the way that it looks, but I'm not sure if it's pronounced that way. He is the one that's sort of like heading this group that's going into the Fishverly Hills and Candy Factory Town, which it's so funny how, like, Candy Factory Town is just the least imaginative name. They went with something very funny, like Fishverly Hills, and then they just sort of decided, that's where we're going to have our fun, and the rest of it just make it as boring as possible. But we see all of these people who are being lined up to, like, step on this portrait, and they are really taking it hard. Like, I was assuming at first that this was a picture of the prince or the king or whatever, and then eventually this woman says, I can't tread on her image. I beg that you understand. And I was like, oh, it's a woman. Is this a deity or something? And I mean, I guess kind of, depending on how much you believe in that aspect of alleged monarchy. Oh, right. And this is where we meet Daruma, who looks like one of those demons that's, like, guarding Buddha. I hope that I can remember these names. Ikaros is pretty easy to remember because it just sounds like Icarus. But Daruma, I don't know if I'm going to be able to hold this one in my brain. But he looks like way less human than any of the other fishmen have so far to me. And it says in front of Fishman Culture Hall is where everybody is gathered here. And folks we're finding out that like all over the place, it's being guaranteed is like the only word I can think of, even though it's so objectively not a guarantee. What the pirates are trying to do is like establish who is willing to turn their back on their current monarchy. And a bunch of people who are resisting are being put down. We've got this drunk guy who's got the gourd full of liquor. And these dudes all say that probably this one guy isn't so tough. We might be able to take him. And he throws his gourd toward them, slices it all into pieces. And I'll be honest, I thought when he did this, all he was doing was trying to kind of intimidate them, that it was just meant to be like, look at how fast I sliced that gourd up and you barely even saw my sword move. So if I can do that to this, what do you think I can do to you? But no, it's he does that and he slices up all of the men that are standing there at the same time. So he's a very much like, if you make me repeat myself, that's the end of it. And he says, anyone who doesn't want to step on the picture is going to get sliced up real good. Then we go to the shopping mall, and there's a bunch of fishmen lined up there in this like sort of arcade in the middle of it. And they're like being told that basically if you don't want to like live under our rule, then you're going to have to leave. And one of the other fishermen's responding with like, where are we supposed to go? Like, humans aren't going to let us live out with them. This is the only place that gets light. Where do you expect us to go? And one of the pirates is like, you see what I'm saying? You are being asked to go anywhere but here, and you don't even know where to start, because human beings are such shitheads that you can't even be like, there's no life outside of just hiding on this island, which means really that you agree with us that trying to make common cause with the humans is a losing fucking battle. There's no way they can ever coexist peacefully. So your best bet is to accept the rule of Horty. Under his reign, we'll have the power to change history. And as he's saying this, and by he, I mean one of the pirates, you don't see who it is. The man he's talking to starts getting this red like mark around his neck, and he's being lifted up bodily off the ground. And there's nothing there for a moment, and then finally there's this slow appearance of a shape, and then eventually we see the weird stripy guy who's apparently named Zio. And his thing evidently is that he can like blend into the background. Like, you know, there's a lot of different creatures that can do this, but that's I always find invisibility to be a really terrifying ability. Like, I think that part of the reason why it affects me so deeply is because when I was like a teen, that fucking Hollow Man movie with Kevin Bacon came out, which is, by the way, one of the worst movies I have ever seen. I was like, it was one of those movies that really makes you understand as a child that like even serious actors who are otherwise successful can still be in total schlock bullshit. And I didn't really like know that then. So I went thinking, oh, it's Kevin Bacon. Like, he's legit. And then it was just awful. But one of the scariest scenes in it is a girl who's just in her bedroom getting ready, and she's like naked in a robe or something and just, you know, brushing her hair before her mirror, and she doesn't know that this dude is standing like a foot behind her, and the scene cuts off just as he's clearly like going to assault her. But that scene just like kind of embedded itself in my brain. And so for me, invisibility has always been like, it's like exactly what fucking Sanji had been saying before about how he wanted to be the creep. That was his power that he wanted, was to be able to be invisible so that he could sneak and watch girls. Like, I always saw invisibility as the power of somebody who wants to prey on other people, and probably women specifically. So I wonder how Sanji's going to feel about this person, even though I don't know if it would technically count as invisibility, because I believe that what we'll find out is that this being has his, like, it's more of like a camouflage effect rather than true invisibility. Still, it's apparently just as effective. So, and then we've got another dude, Dosen, is that his name? Who has this like giant hammer. Dosen is, I think, my favorite design out of all of these fishmen. You know, when we were with the Arlong pirates, the duck lips guy was just so like bonkers that he really won my heart, along with the fact that he looked like a Backstreet Boy. But Dosen has this fucking brow ridge that like caves downward, and he looks almost like a hammerhead. I can't tell if that's like fully, because I think that's what we're doing with him having the hammer. I think that's the joke, right? But, oh, he's so cool looking, and he's got this like real pale pink hair. It's sort of dope, I'm not gonna lie. So he swings down on this random citizen, and ta-da, the prince shows up, which is funny because I was actually thinking that he kind of looked a little bit like the prince. I think it's the long flowing pastel hair. And the prince decks this dude and just comes upon him saying, "What is the meaning of this, you scum? How dare you?" And then says, "Forcing people to tread on the image of my late mother." And we see finally the picture of this like very, when you see her moving and in action, his mother doesn't look as stupid as she does in this picture. This picture looks like the brand mascot for like a baking mix or something. She's just, that particular image for me almost made me laugh out loud because it just seemed so, she looks like she's like 12, you know? But anyway, we go through all of that before we finally go back to Luffy. And, oh my God, I don't even think we have yet. I'm looking at this. No, we have still like another conversation amongst all of the other people who saw the princess, and they are deciding what to do. They apparently think that probably Luffy is part of the pirates that are terrorizing everybody else, and that she only said that she would be ready like and home for dinner because she was forced to by them. And as they're all like talking about this and whether or not there's a link there, there's another old lady who comes running in, and she says that there have been some other disappearances of mermaids. And this is something that all the townspeople are sort of like, if the Straw Hats are in league with the other pirates on the island, that means that they're like teamed up with the fishmen. And if they're teamed up with them, they wouldn't sell mermaids, would they? That feels like that's completely antithetical to what they're doing. And as they're trying to puzzle through how this could be, we then go to Wet Hair Caribou, and he has just seen the giant princess mermaid, And his assumption is if she's like 70, if she's 10 times the size of a normal mermaid and a normal one is worth 70 million, she is the mermaid motherlode. I will be able to get so much for her. It's so funny to me, you guys, because there's no real, like, plan here. He just says it's a mermaid motherlode. Any way you slice it, I'll make a fortune. And then he sees, like, another mermaid who says, "Who are you?" And he goes, "Let me introduce myself," and goes after her. Now, I don't know exactly how he's thinking he's going to be able to capture and hold Shirahoshi and transport her back up to the surface where he can make money by selling her. This mermaid is so enormous. The thing is, like, we know that Shirahoshi is such a crybaby and so gentle that even though she could, like, pick up a human being and just crush them in her bare hand, probably, we know she wouldn't, right? That's just not who she is. However, he doesn't know that, and it just feels hilarious to me that he would ever even conceive of the fact that he could take her prisoner, because, sir, you would fit in her mouth. Like, what are you even thinking here? Seraphim is in the chat. Hi, Seraphim. Dosen is a hammerhead shark fishman, and Zio is a wobegong shark, also called a carpet shark, who are extremely skilled at camouflage. A carpet shark. Interesting. Thank you for that, Seraphim. I never heard of that. I'm going to look that up later. Okay, so here is when we finally go back to the sea forest. And I couldn't believe it, y'all. We did so much between that I'm like, oh, good. We're getting back to the sea forest, and we're finally going to have the conversation about the giant bombshell that Jimbei just dropped. But no, instead, we're dealing with, like, the princess crying and Jimbei comforting her. Him, like, your father is tougher than you realize. And all of this, like, conversation is happening around it. It takes so long to get back to the point. He finally says, "Excuse me, I have a matter to discuss with Luffy and his crew." And I'm going, thank you, Jimbei. Yeah, this felt like something we really shouldn't have. We should have gotten right back to. We get interrupted again by Sanji, who is dancing by with cups of tea for all of the ladies. He somehow managed to find a giant cup for the giant princess, which is, I mean, that's just resourceful. I gotta give him props for that. He's, like, delivering all of this too with this very acrobatic style. And Nami's response, she says, "Whatever, just leave it over there for right now," and points. And she then says, "You've bothered us enough already. We're having a serious talk." And, like, considering everything, he interrupts yet again. "You're so sexy when you're stern with me, Nami." Guys, we're having a conversation with somebody who's, like, indirectly responsible for her foster mother's death, being murdered in front of Nami's eyes. But we have to, like, watch Sanji cartwheel around first. Oh my god. And then finally Nami says, "Okay, Jimbei, let's settle this." And the way this is written cracked me up. She says, "Tell me, what did you mean? Earlier, you said you set Arlong loose." The way that she phrases it sounds like this has been a good 30-minute interval. After he says, like, "I set him free," and then we just did other shit for a while, like, framing it as earlier, instead of her just being like, "What did you mean?" I know that it's supposed to be her just refreshing the audience, but it just there's no urgency to the conversation. And I was so certain that she was going to be, and she clearly, like, she's very sober in the way that she's speaking to him. So there is that gravity to it once we get started again. But God, it took so long to get back to the convo, and then it's being talked about as if this was like us picking up the next day almost. So yeah, Jimbei like is about to tell, and Hachi interrupts and is like, you know, I can't remember if he says don't. I think he does. I'm just gonna go back and look. Let's see. He says, no, Jimbei, wait. And then Sanji says, I heard the same thing. A while back when Luffy and I first learned about Jimbei of the Seven Warlords, Yosaku told us about the bargain that Jimbei struck. He's a warlord. In exchange for becoming one of the seven, Jimbei let a dangerous fishman run wild in the East Blue. I do not remember this character at all. Forgive me, guys. This didn't ring a bell. We even like go have like a kind of flashback of this character, and I couldn't place them at all. I know that we must have met them, and this is like, you know, footage from back when it was animated the first time, but I totally do not recall. And I really felt like I must have missed an episode. I don't think I did, but you know. But yeah, and Luffy, who apparently was there, does not remember. So Sanji continues on saying, like, 2 years ago when I read about you associating with Jimbei in the newspaper, I honestly didn't know what to think about it. I thought Jimbei had been the key figure pulling Arlong's strings and telling him what to do. So, Jimbei, I'll give you a chance to defend what happened, but choose your words wisely. After all, our very own navigator here had her entire life ruined thanks to your buddy Arlong. To put it simply, whatever you did turned her world into a living hell. And while I appreciate Sanji trying to, like, handle this, back up, dude. Like, this isn't your, you know, it's just very frustrating for a dude to insert himself into things when this has nothing to do with you. You weren't even, like, part of stuff. You know, like, he was part of the battle, but he wasn't part, or was he? He was there, right? But he wasn't, like, living on the island, and he doesn't know what it was like for Nami. And I just really wanted to tell him to, like, let Nami have this moment, because saying choose your words wisely, it's like very much, I'm going to do something to you if you say things wrong. And she didn't ask you to do that, and you didn't consult with her on how she wanted this handled or how she was feeling about any of it. So I understand that it's supposed to be him sort of having her back, but because everything with Sanji has felt very sour to me with this arc and the way that he's being written, it just really rubbed me the wrong way, because it pairs up with him having a certain attitude towards women in general that I'm very tired of at this point. And he says something like, I might not forgive you. And I was like, who's asking for your forgiveness? This is just nothing to do with you, man. Like, get the fuck out of here. So Hachi sits up and he says he's right. We caused her so much grief. It's horrible. And all the apologizing in the world won't change a thing. Jimbei's face here seems truly stunned. And I thought when he was, like, telling them all of this that he was aware of the backstory with Nami. But the way that he reacts when Sanji tells him this makes me think that he actually only knew that Luffy took care of Arlong and didn't realize that Nami had been like a resident of the island that Arlong took over. So here I am as a viewer seeing this moment, and it's not even like Nami getting to make her declarations about how she feels about it. And I'm already a little irritated. And then instead of Jimbei like getting a chance to explain immediately, it's the obligatory flashbacks. And we go through the people that Nami loved and lost, and the murder in front of her, and being taken in by the pirates and kidnapped so that she was forced to be their navigator. And I'm just like, oh my God, can we please just get an explanation? And Jimbei just says, I'm sorry, you had a truly horrific experience. And Nami says, I did. It was a nightmare. Nothing will ever make me change the way I feel about Arlong. That said, until 2 years ago, when we made the trip to Sabaody, I had no idea that even the strongest fishmen were routinely persecuted by humans. When Kami was kidnapped and we tried to save her, I couldn't believe what I saw. And she says it was Sabaody Park right in front of me. The spitting image of Arlong Park before it was destroyed. Guys, they don't look the same. They don't, right? This confused me a lot. She's saying the spitting image, and we are given a like almost side by side look at these two buildings, and they look completely different. What are we doing? It just you're telling me a thing. I don't know. Maybe it's the translation. Maybe it's supposed to be like not that the buildings look identical, but that they have a similar like. But spitting image means identical. But you guys, like, the Sabaody Park is white with like a round sort of turret with different floors, and several other turrets going around it that are like also round. It's got much more of like almost a birthday cake sort of aesthetic to it. And then we cut to Arlong Park, which is square and yellow with red pointy roofs in a sort of like pagoda style. And it felt very strange because it was like almost as if the dialogue was trying to retcon something that the animation didn't support at all. Seraphim says there's some similarity, but yeah, translation thing. Though the live action won't say way more into... Sorry, I think there's a typo, but way more into Arlong Park matching up to Sabaody Park with all the carnival games. Went way more. Oh, I see. Oh, I get. Yeah, I forgot about the carnival things that they did with the live action, and it's so funny because like watching the live action, I don't remember if I even asked why there were so many carnival games. I think that I assumed those carnival games had like been there for the island, and that when Arlong took over, they were still there. You know, he just didn't get rid of them. I don't think I realized that he had like put them in place. And I figured that it was just meant to make it an interesting set piece. Okay. But yeah, it just was a weird moment of like, am I taking crazy pills? The only thing that's like at all similar are the fonts on the front of each of the buildings. And Hachi says, we wanted a place of our own. I'm not saying this to make you forgive any of us, but it's true. Arlong really hated humans too much. And we get a flashback from Hachi's POV about how much he terrorized people. And he says, you know, he went too far. But for as long as I can remember, we yearned for the world that the humans lived in. And we get to see all of them as little kids, frankly adorable, swimming up to the surface. And they're gazing on the land and just sort of this, like, it's just absolutely out of their reach. And all of the shining lights of the carnival and everything that's happening. And there's nothing distinct about it. It's just sort of the overall impression of all of this light and color and how magical it seemed. And I really liked the way that this was done, because this is something that felt really true to how memory can work from when you're a kid. You don't fully, like, you don't have a full picture in your mind. You remember the overall impression more than you remember anything specific. And so the fact that, like, we know that they're looking at a carnival, they probably didn't know that's what they were looking at as little kids. They just knew it was flashing lights and, you know, moving objects and sound, and it was exciting and different and enraptured them. And Hachi said, our jealousy drove us to hurt people like you. And as he's saying this, he's like getting very agitated, and Chopper has to come over and be like, sir, you're going to make yourself sick. You've got to lay down and I'm going to make more medicine for you. So Hachi is like, we were not considered anything more than basically just fish. And then 200 years ago, the Ryungu Kingdom became a member country of the world government. They established friendly relations with humans, and their king was even allowed to participate in the World Summit. But despite that, humans still had hate in their hearts. The beginning of the Great Pirate Era was probably the worst time in my life. This is Den talking. It was hard to be a fishman. I vividly remember my fear. Human pirates running wild on the island. Anywhere you went seemed dangerous. So much violence. I'll never forget. And we see like a flashback of all of these pirates landing, explosions, fire, and I'm sorry guys, Pippin again. Pippin, can you stop it please? So Jimbei then says, and then it was the fateful day where Whitebeard arrived on the island and saved us. I'm so sorry, you guys. Oh, this dog. He made his powerful presence felt, claiming Fishman Island as his own. Because of him, peace returned to our home. And then he's like, you know, that was great. He really tried to help, but he couldn't just single-handedly change the way that people saw us. All right, hold on. I'm just going to put him out. Hold on. All right, come on. You interfering. Go. He's very restless today. Oh, my poor back. Sorry about that. But yeah, he's like the reality that you saw at Sabaody, like that's the way things have been. And folks who are able to get power are often resistant to change once they get there. So even though there were lots of promises made about how we were going to fix the relationship between fishmen and humans, the worst bigots, and they used that word, which I really appreciated, were the people in control to begin with, the ones who should be leading by example. So it just didn't change anything. And, you know, we had the people here who were deciding that they were going to handle shit, and there were two different figures. we had first the queen, Otohime. I'm going to pretty much mostly just call her the queen. Now, we get to see some of what her deal was. It's kind of funny because she's like there's a connection drawn between her and the princess being crybabies. And the princess's crying is just so without cause a lot of the time to me. But the queen's makes a lot more sense. And I was just like, Princess, can you do it like this? Can you like make your crying meaningful instead of just this annoying background noise? And then he says, and the other one was named Fisher Tiger, who freed countless slaves. And this is somebody that we have heard of. To set himself apart from the humans, Tiger broke an unspoken rule, invading the holy land of Marie-Joie himself and freeing the slaves within. He would go on to form the Sun Pirates. Many of its members were fishermen who were formerly slaves of the nobles. And they are the ones who make up the Sun Pirates. And he's like, yeah, that the brand that we all had was meant to cover up the brand that was given to us when we were slaves to identify us. And he says we were seen as foes of the world government. We made it that much more difficult for the queen. And he says, bless her heart. But I don't really get a sense, even though he says like we were making it harder for her, I don't believe he really regrets what he did. And I don't think he should, for the record. There's just a real sort of sense of like, I know her heart was in the right place, and I know that she was doing the best that she could, but there was just no way for both of our methods to like coexist well. And he says like the queen was trying to, preserve our future. She was very forward thinking. But Fisher Tiger threw his future away to save those of his race who were suffering as slaves. No one can say who was right or wrong. And he says, like, they both wanted the same thing. Either way, they both wanted to make life better for the fishmen, and both of their lives ended in total tragedy, but they were working toward the same goal, even if it didn't look like they were. And then the episode ends, and I was so irritated because we're getting into some interesting territory here, but like, there's still no explanation explicitly for Arlong yet, which is how the cliffhanger of the previous episode ended. And I was like, are you serious? Like, we're still not just going to get that explanation yet? I understand that we're like setting the stage and everything, and that is necessary, but I'm just telling you how I felt at the end of this one. I was just like, oh, come on. So then we go into episode 2 of the 3. And we get the story about the queen and how she was handling things. And we get one of the most bizarre... So, all right, Jimbei says, you have to understand what our world was like 16 years ago. And we find out that the queen, she was like out and about one day when a robber stole a bunch of money from some business, and he flees down the street carrying a mermaid at gunpoint as a hostage to guarantee his own getaway. And the queen sees this, and she decides she's going to get involved, despite all of her guards telling her not to. And she just heads towards this guy at full speed, and he shoots at her. And evidently misses. It was a little like unclear to me at first. I thought that she was going to have like some sort of devil fruit power, and it may be that she has, and we just didn't get to find out what it is yet. But it seems like she's just dodging all of the bullets, because he pulls that trigger a few times. So maybe it's supposed to be not necessarily like a devil fruit power, but just that she is so quick, and agile that she is able to dodge. And she manages to just slap this guy across the face and sends him flying. The poor mer girl, she goes flying and gets caught by one of the guards. And then we have the queen standing over this man. And she has the weirdest face, you guys. She's got like a very round face with a pointy chin, but her eyes and nose and mouth are set down into like the bottom half of the circle. So she's got a really big forehead, and just her face just takes up so little space. The whole thing, she also, it turns out, is like super delicate. So she fractured her hand somehow by just hitting this guy. Is this supposed to be like she's so incredibly feminine that she's like more delicate than average? Because there's a couple times where people mention the fact that can be easily hurt. And the scene with her and this dude, she just starts to like, he explains about how he has children at home who are starving. And she had just yelled at him about how he's being foolish and selfish. But he's like, well, you don't understand what my life is like. So then she's like continuing to hit him because she's like, how do you think your children would feel knowing their father was a criminal? But then also starts crying about his hardships and the fact that she wasn't even aware of what a subject of her house was going through, and how like much she regrets that and feels that she has let him down. But then she beats him up again, and it just goes back and forth with her yelling at him and hitting him again. And all of the people on the sidelines are kind of like, they're not sure what to think. As soon as they start to be like, oh, she's such a good, patient, merciful person, then she hits him again, and everybody's sort of like, wait, what? And then somebody's like, oh, look at all these children. They even love her. And they come running up to her, and she turns to see them, and she says, I will do everything I can to protect your smiling faces. And the first boy that reaches her, she just slaps to the floor and says, your nose is running terribly. If I don't reprimand you for it, who will? So first of all, what the fuck is with everybody hitting children? It's just so, like, these stories are just full of people who are meant to be good, decent human beings who are ultimately lovable. And yet, my God, can you restrain yourselves, please? But then to top off the weirdness, she says to the little boy that she hit once he sits up with tears in his eyes, you look ridiculous with mucus dribbling out of just one side. It's more dignified to dribble from both nostrils. At which point, he rushes her with a giant bear hug for some reason. Okay, I guess. This is for me, this is very nothing. Like, this queen she sucks. Like, this combined with her just like wandering around trying to get everybody to like sign this agreement, I was like, wow, you are really not doing anything, huh? Like, it just felt like the most silly, pointless exercise to just wander around. First of all, she's the queen, so she could just make things happen to a degree if she wanted to. But she's not offering any actual reassurances to the people that she's trying to get to sign this like agreement to go live amongst the humans. and I appreciate that she's not giving a guarantee on the one hand, because it's not as if that's something that she can really, like, she can't deliver on that. However, it also doesn't seem like she's really thought that part through. She seems to just want people to, like, go live near humans and trust that eventually this will be good for all of us, even though in the short term they are probably going to suffer and die, and they're still out here being sold as slaves. So she's got no plan except that, like, it's the first step towards things eventually, like, getting better between the two of us, which isn't really, like, it's sort of one of those points of view that drives me nuts, which is the idea that, like, progress is an inevitability of time passing. And that's not true. Progress has to be worked for. Education has to be done. There needs to be, like, a real specific type of attempt. And she's not offering anything specific enough. She just wants these people to risk their lives and their freedom in this, what feels like, very vague and unorganized way. So, between the weirdness of this encounter with this guy and the children, and the way that she keeps waving around this agreement that she's trying to get people to sign, I pretty much had my fill of her, like, immediately. I am not interested. She, like, I'm sure she meant well, but this is just a complete waste of time. Seraphim says her frailty, I think, is more due to her being a goldfish mermaid. Oh. And the kid slapping thing is just a cultural thing, with tough love being more accepted there, at least at the time and when people like Oda were growing up. I know that, but it's not fun to watch. It's disturbing, honestly, to, like, watch it happen and then watch that person immediately hug that child, and that child is supposed to, like, be glad that they were hit and still trust that adult. Like, I do not enjoy it. And I love when somebody is like, oh, she's such a good person, and another person in the audience just says, I guess so. That was my fucking reaction also. So I appreciated that there was somebody else there who was feeling the same sort of misgivings that I was. So I'm going to jump ahead a little bit here, because there's a lot of, like, her attempting to speechify and convince people, and it's not really working. And let's see, I'm trying to see. Oh yeah. So the two, I can't remember, are they called left and right? Is that what you guys told me? The two sort of advisors to the king are talking to him about, like, what she's doing is really dangerous. And he's like, yeah, she knows that. But, and he says our ancestors weren't able to make this vision a reality. I can't stop her from doing what she thinks is right. So it's your job to keep her safe. And then we go to a bar where a bunch of humans are sitting, getting waited on by a fish woman, and the place is full of other fishmen. And apparently these guys are, like, I think they're propositioning her, because one of them says, like, we want special service, and she says, I don't know what you mean. And he says, oh, come on, we know how you fishmen are. And at first I thought he was actually specifically talking about the men in the room, but then I realized he meant, like, the race, and I think it's supposed to be like, oh, we know that your, like, species is particularly sexual, promiscuous, whatever, and so we're here to cash in on that because we all know that about you, which is actually a thing with a lot of different groups, but with black folks especially being sexualized, that is, like, a very persistent narrative, and it's super gross. But this dude is trying to start some shit, and he really is acting tough until finally Jimbei says, "Get out of here, you're ruining my meal." And when he turns and sees the size of Jimbei and the overall vibe, he just immediately is like, sorry, never mind. And I was like, yeah, that's a good call. I kind of thought he might keep pushing the issue. And instead, he immediately recognizes that this is not the one. Move on. Do something else with your time. So we then get the talk about this like particular neighborhood that he grew up in. So Jimbei is talking about how, like, you know, we grew up in this particular district that is a bad neighborhood. And he says there's not a lot of options when you come from there. Originally, it was an orphanage for children with no living relatives, but in time, the orphanage became too much for the administrators to handle. Before long, it became a lawless area that attracted delinquents from all over the island. Back then, Fisher Tiger was the only one that we had as a leader, but he eventually left to do his own thing. So I joined Neptune's army. Despite being fishmen, Macro and some of the others started helping the kidnappers, which is really, again, that's like a thing that happened, but also is, it's weaponized so much that I don't even like to bring it up because it's always like a bad faith mention. And he says everybody else left, and then one day he runs into Arlong, who is he's got one of the collections of signatures. And this woman, I don't remember if it's mentioned specifically, but I'm assuming that she's working on behalf of the queen, collecting these people who are agreeing to try out this experiment. And Arlong is confronted by one of the fishmen who is yelling at him about like where he's from. So even though he is also a fishman, he is still talking down to Arlong in a way that I was just like, wow, yeah, this makes sense though. Nobody's a monolith, and even within a particular like oppressed group, there is still a hierarchy and a structure there that people can use to make themselves feel better than other people. So he grabs this guard and picks him up, and he's like, I'm gonna fucking go around and clean up these fucking humans. You guys in Neptune's army should be thanking us. Maybe I should beat a donation out of you. And Jimbei is sitting right there doing nothing. This guy has to yell and be like, Jimbei, hey, this guy is going to kill me, I think. Can you... And Jimbei is like smoking a pipe and just very slowly says, all right, punk, put the rookie down and just walk away. He's weak, but he's one of my men. And I was just like, I don't feel we're going to do anything until he cried out for help, were you, Jimbei? It just felt really like he was just going to sit and watch. There was no urgency to this at all. And he says, and as far as those papers you took, they mean nothing to you, but the queen wants them. And Arlong starts laughing. And he's like, they're calling you boss. That's not the way that soldiers normally like talk to somebody in charge. What's that about? And he tosses this dude aside, gives him the papers back, and by gives them back, I mean tosses them on top of the man on the ground, and then calls him brother and says, I can always recognize somebody who came from the Fishman district. And Arlong is like trying to really ingratiate himself here. But Jimbei is saying, I don't want to be categorized alongside you. You became a fucking bullshit pirate. Like, you're trash. And Arlong says, it doesn't matter where we're from. You can't talk to me like that. And as they're about to, like, go head to head, there's a yell, and it turns out that our friend, oh my god, catfish? I keep wanting to say that. Tigerfish? Tiger shark? I don't remember. But we're just going to call him Tiger. He comes up and he's about to report to the palace. He has been on some adventures and he has seen some shit. And what he tells them when he goes in and has his like moment is that he has seen human nature. And that's kind of all he needs to say. And the queen begins to like get tears in her eyes because it's very clear that what he has witnessed has been truly horrific. And he says, Neptune says, you're telling me you're going to free the slaves? Surely you can't be serious. And Tiger says, I am. I can't stand it anymore. The thought of our people living a nightmare, even as we're speaking right now, our people are being treated like animals. And Neptune says, yes, but. And I was like, I don't like that, Neptune. Come on. And Tiger says, look, I'm not excited about this. I am telling you because I know it's going to be a problem for you. But please don't rat me out. And Neptune says, why are you so adamant about this? And I'm just like, sir, why aren't you more adamant yourself? Like, why? I understand handling things on a diplomatic level, but he really just doesn't seem upset enough to me at all. And the like way that this episode ends is some dude like running off and running into Jimbei and telling Jimbei that Tiger attacked the celestial dragons. And we get to jump over to like the Marie Joie where all of the slaves were freed, and we see Boa and her sisters leaving. And he is just like with one fucking fell swoop really started a war here. And Jimbei hears this and he is inspired. And he decides to fucking quit the guards and go and join up. And Arlong also hears the news and is like, oh yeah, this is what we want to be in on. And so we get the scene where they're all getting together and they are agreeing to work for Tiger, and they all get branded to cover up if they had scars from being branded as slaves or not. All of them have this same brand, so you can't tell who used to be a slave and who didn't, which I think is a really cool idea. So I kind of like, I've talked a lot about some of the stuff that's coming up next, but I think that like, because I'm running out of time here, I'm going to mainly talk for the next episode just about the contrast between the way that Tiger is trying to approach this versus the way that Arlong wants to approach this. And the way that Tiger is going about this is essentially you have to give up on your need for revenge. That's the part that is going to tip us over into them just coming back at us. If we can't just move forward and forgive and look to the future, it's going to be this endless cycle. And understandably, Arlong is just really not down for that. He just, is like, what's the point of doing this if we're then going to try and like make nice with them? We just rescued these people from literal cages, from being treated like chattel. And now I'm supposed to, like, build a house next to them and just live beside them? And you think that's gonna work? I'm so sorry, bruh, but that's not how we want to operate. And the like success of rescuing all of these different slaves, it's like very invigorating for everybody and inspirational to all of them. But, you know, every second that they have, like, well, maybe we can make it work with humans, they run across another person who is just like, oh, you're nothing but animals. You're, you know, like freaks and mutants and whatever. And there aren't enough decent people to make it feel like all humans aren't the enemy. The Queen keeps having to say that I know some humans are bad, but there are good ones out there. And I was like, look, there are, and I know that, but also we don't really see any in the midst of this whole, like, flashback. And at one point they take a ship, and one of the, I don't know if he's like just the captain or if he has a more official title with the Marines, but Tiger picks this guy up and dangles him over the side, but then says, I'm not going to kill you because we're not monsters. And as he leaves this guy there, Arlong comes out and tosses some other dude to the ground and says, you were born human, which is a sin, so you're worthy of execution. And just, like, slaughters this dude on the deck in front of everybody. And we go to Kizaru here, who is getting, like, the news about all of this, and I cannot get over how funny his whole delivery of everything is. How, oh, scary. Fishman. Guess we should have expected that. And he's got, like, a real tone to him that he's not that concerned or invested, even though I believe he is. It's just the way he talks. And we have yet to fight them on land, so it's hard to tell how strong they are. Arlong, right. I've heard of him. And I just want to say, like, we know what's going on here, but we still haven't gotten the, like, released Arlong thing. We still haven't gotten the answer to that. So eventually we have the introduction of this little human girl character who is she was apparently being held as a slave despite being human. I don't really understand how this happens because I didn't get the impression that that was, like, ever allowed. But I must be wrong. She hasn't seen her parents in many years. She would like to help. It's doubtful we can get her safely across the ocean. Can she go with you? Her name is Koala, and she is smiling constantly. But later on, we find out kind of what's going on with that. So they take her on, but Arlong is himself really not on board. He's like, she's a fucking human. What did you agree to this for? And he decks her and sends her, like, flying over the deck. He decks her to the deck. And Arlong is like, and why is she smiling? Why is she still smiling? When she sits up, she's bleeding, but she's still smiling, and she rips off a piece of her own, like, pants and begins to scrub the floor, the deck, and says, I'm sorry, I'll clean. I will work. I'm not going to be a bother to you. And the voice actress who does her voice for this scene is so good because she just really makes this plea, like, devastating. And eventually Jimbei comes and sits in front of her and is like, hey, stop, you know, it's okay. We're not going to do that to you. Can you blame her that she's not trusting anybody, that she's trying to keep this smile on her face? And she keeps on talking about how she won't cry. And finally Tiger comes to her and is like, it is okay if you cry. And eventually he's like, bring her into my cabin, and you hear her scream. And when she comes out, she's got the brand on her back that all of them have. So she's like officially a member of the crew now. And I don't know that we have met Koala or if we are going to. I feel like this is a completely new character. But she is just so like insistent that they won't kill her because she won't cry. And just eventually when they're like, no, but you can, Tiger goes to like the edge of the ship and takes the gun and tosses it over and has everybody behind him drop their weapons and like makes it clear, everybody is with me. We're not going to hurt you no matter how far the journey. And he says, we're taking this girl back home. And finally, Koala lets herself cry. Now, I'm a little concerned because I know how Arlong is, exactly how this is going to go. We do see some of the fishmen, by the way, in this crew that we dealt with back on Nami's island. So Duck Lips is making an appearance here. But yeah, Arlong, he's like the only one that's really not participating in the cheering and the ceremony of the moment. And I'm not excited about seeing how he decides to try and fuck this whole thing up, because I feel like it's going to be not good. But yeah, okay, that's everything. I'm going to wrap this one up because I am over time as usual. But I am interested at how Arlong gets got and how Jimbei lets him out, but we still don't know. So I'll have to see. Thank you again, Florian, for commissioning this one. And thank you to Seraphim for being in the chat. Until next time, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.